Cranes are large birds. They stand 3 to 4 feet tall, have a wingspan of 6 to 7 feet, and they have the habit, at least in the non-breeding season, to gather together in large numbers.
And anytime you get this many birds in one place, you're going to draw a crowd. That's certainly the case here at the Jasper-Pulaski Fish and Wildlife Area near Madeiraville. Throughout most of the year, the visitors to these 8,000 acres are hunters. But for decades, every fall, and to a lesser degree in the spring, it's bird watchers drawn to northwest Indiana by thousands of migrating cranes.
So if you were to put a dot in central Wisconsin, which is the core nesting area, and a dot in central Florida, which is the core wintering area, lo and behold, guess who's right underneath that line if you drew a straight line? Jasper-Pulaski. So the cranes learned to use this area, and today they use it in large numbers, probably more than they would have in the 1800s and the early 1900s. During the day, they fly out to the surrounding private land and they feed in agricultural fields that have been harvested. And then in the late afternoon to sunset, even sometimes after sunset, they'll return to the fish and wildlife area. And the behavior that this population has developed is that a large percentage stop in the field called goose pasture before they fly into the wetlands to roost at night. That's just a unique feature of this particular population of cranes, which makes great viewing opportunities.
To give guests a better idea of how great the opportunity will be, Jim and his crew do a count every Tuesday this time of year. As of last week, there were nearly 10,000 birds flocking to goose pasture each night.
Historically, the cranes tended to peak in mid-October. That peak is now late November to early December. We've had peak counts as high as 35,000. Probably the more average is 12 to 16,000, sometimes the low 20,000s.
The numbers are striking, especially when you consider that the cranes seen at Jasper-Pulaski today were nearly wiped out in the early 1900s.
Sandhill crane populations reached their lowest numbers in the 30s and the 40s. Some of the estimates are only 300 pairs in this particular population existed in the 1930s. And so its habitat was protected in the breeding areas, which are just north of Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and a little bit into southern Canada. The population began to increase, and that happened to coincide with the development of this area beginning in the 1930s. What we did for waterfowl management, ducks and geese, benefited cranes, and the position of Jasper-Pulaski, the cranes used the area and then continued to use it.
So if you like to come see the cranes, Jim has a few tips.
Well, check the weather. Dress appropriately. If you have binoculars, bring them. The viewing platform does have outdoor spotting scopes. Considering they're outdoors, they're pretty good, but they're limited. So if you have other optical equipment, that would be great to bring. A lot of people envision that you're going to almost be able to walk amongst the cranes, but you have to remember that these are wild critters, and in most cases with any wild critter, you can't approach very closely. Now, based on the nature of this viewing area, they become quite accustomed to the people in the viewing area. So as long as people stay within the boundaries of the viewing area, oftentimes the view is quite close.